Hi, folks. Welcome to our weekly discussion. Thanks for joining me. I don't see anybody watching live, but I am a little late today, so sorry about that. Dealing with some allergies, so apologies again for that, but hopefully we'll make it through. Thanks again for all the support of this project. Every week, sometimes I wonder, I'm a pessimist sometimes, and I think nobody's listening, and then folks send in questions, comments, suggestions. It's great. So that's wonderful. So thanks. A lot of the great comments and topics that we talk about are from you. So that's wonderful. This week's topic's actually been something I've been thinking about for a while, and it's recurring. It's one of those things. A lot of the topics that we talk about here are recurring, but uh, got to thinking about it again. But it kind of goes back to a memory I have of posting something on Facebook once, and I believe it was a magazine. I think it was an old Life or Look magazine. There used to be a magazine called Look after JFK was assassinated, John F. Kennedy, and it was a commemorative issue, and that's why it was saved. But when I looked in the inside, it was around Christmas time, of course, November, so they had all the Christmas advertising in this magazine, and many of the ads were downright sexist by today's standards. And there would be women, literally at the feet of their husbands as they came home. Like the woman would be sitting on the floor, doting over her husband, and the ad would be, something about, is your husband happy? Are you doing enough to make your husband happy? Buy him this particular product. Selling vacuum, giving your wife a vacuum cleaner or something like that for Christmas. A lot of it was crazy how blatant the sexism was in these advertisements. I posted these on social media to share them, just to kind of show folks what Christmas advertising used to be in the 1960s. And I had one person criticize me for posting them, saying, uh, uh, all but ordering me to take them down, because they said that women do not need to be reminded of this time period. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting perspective. I disagree, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Uh, so that was just one instance. Another one happened again more recently, and this happens over and over again when you work in an archive. And a particular collection that we have at the historian's office is high school field day photographs. There used to be this annual event in East Aurora where schools, all the one-room schoolhouses from around the area would come to Hamlin Park at East Aurora. They'd actually have a huge parade down Main Street. Businesses would close, and there would be a theme each year, and each school would sort of adopt a theme similar to what we do at homecoming, but on a much larger scale. And there'd be competitions in the park. This is where they would give out the awards each year to the students. So we have gobs of photographs, and our volunteers and I were going through them, and we're organizing them, make sure we have the years and having them labeled properly. And one of the volunteers said, and we have these unfortunate ones, and she points to this short stack of students in Hamlin Park enacting, putting on it looked like a play. They would do some acting, and little theater drama productions were part of the field day, but they were in blackface. And it was the students, they didn't have black painted on their face. They had stockings over their face, knitted stockings over their face with holes for their eyes and holes for their mouths. And actually, some of them were even had sewn in there or knitted in bigger lips around the lips. And it was the Aunt Jemima look. They were dressed up as the cooks, and maids, but that was the look. And those photos were, and I'm kind of still speechless trying to talk about it now, because we were thrown off by these, because you have a whole bunch of pictures of teachers and students doing wonderful things, positive things, competitions, parades, all these wonderful things of field day. And then within these pictures were children having fun dressed in blackface. And so the question was, what do we do with these pictures? Do we set them aside? Do we get rid of them? Do we throw them out? And it took me only a second because some people were ready to rip them up because they were uncomfortable by them. And I thought, nope, they go right back in. They go in the year in which that field day was, and it was in the 1920s. We may put a warning label on them. We may stick them in a opaque envelope or an envelope so you can't see them right away, so that if you wanted to look at them, so anybody that's looking through would be warned ahead of time that it's a sensitive thing. But we can't censor uncomfortable history. This happened in East Aurora. This happened in Hamlin Park. This happened on our field day. Similarly to the first thing that I had posted on Facebook about the Christmas ads and the role of women in Christmas advertising in the 1960s was we had a photograph of in the newspaper of a church that one of our local churches had a talent show back in the 20s, 1920s, and part of the talent show was a minstrel show, and you came and you paid money, and it was a fundraiser, and the members of the church, all white, were in blackface, and the picture was right in the local newspaper. So this got posted onto Facebook. I don't know if I did or someone else did, but it was posted on Facebook. And there were all sorts of people saying that this was inappropriate and should not be put out there. It's racist. Yes, it is racist. And my opinion is, yes, it's racist, but it needs to be not ignored. Perhaps there's more sensitivity we could have about how it's presented and warning you that it's going to be perhaps sensitive. But context is everything. There's a difference between using an old picture like that and making a racist joke in 2023 and posting that picture as an educational tool of what was happening in 1923 here in East Aurora. Excuse me, my allergies. I talked about that earlier. Sorry about that. So we cannot ignore it. There were sometimes where we do censor history a little bit. For instance, there was a newspaper article one time where I posted it on Facebook to share it, that there was the police were warning about illegal activity at night in Oakwood Cemetery. And they had actually arrested people, and they put their names in the newspaper. And what was really interesting is that they said they warned that the police were going to be shining their spotlights into Oakwood Cemetery. But I blacked out the names. And the reason I did that was because there could be family members still around who may be embarrassed by that. However, also, we had no idea. They didn't even say in the article what the illegal activity was. So it could have been a whole host of things that could have been happening. So, however, I didn't rip up the newspaper that contained the article. You could still go back. If anybody really wanted to go back and look, they could. I was just censoring it in that instance, but not ripping it up. So, for instance, I would never rip up an old picture, whether it's racist or not. The Ku Klux Klan was active in East Aurora and in Western New York in the 1920s, and this was about the same time that these sorts of things were happening. The minstrel shows, the blackface. So it fits into the history of our region and the nation. We weren't exempt from it, and the photographs prove that, and the newspaper articles of the time prove that. What I was struck by was the nonchalant attitude toward this racism. They had no idea what they were doing. And maybe they did, but it just was like the fact that the newspaper just published the picture gave no thought of how inappropriate blackface was at a church, talent show, and on the field at Hamlin Park during a school field day. Just kind of blew my mind. So if we censor this history, if we ignore things that are uncomfortable, we get a warped view of our history. A lot of times, town historians especially, historical societies, sometimes are encouraged or criticized when they're encouraged to promote positive history. And we get criticized sometimes when we talk about negative history. And we can't ignore it. You have to discuss it. One of the big things here in East Aurora is Millard Fillmore. And I'm going to talk a little bit more of that as a full discussion in a couple weeks. But there are some people that I've talked to that think we should not, they call him a racist and a bad president. Now, listen in the future weeks and we'll talk about whether that's true. And because of that, we should not discuss him. We should ignore him. We shouldn't be writing books about him. We shouldn't be talking about him. And quite the contrary. Some of the things that Millard Fillmore did as president make me very uncomfortable and make us very uncomfortable and should. But one of the things we need to realize and learn is, and I hope I don't sound too preachy about this, but is learn why. Why was he feeling that he could sign a fugitive slave law? Why was it okay for students to be wearing blackface at a field day in the 1920s in Hamlin Park? Why was it okay for churches to have a blackface during their talent show and for the newspaper to publish a picture of it? And why was it okay for women to be treated a certain way in advertising, which was a reflection of how they were really treated? Women weren't allowed to get their own credit cards and bank accounts into the 1970s and 80s. So, which is hard to believe, but it's true. So we need to know why. And if we start ripping up photographs and not putting them in the context, in their context, then we lose that history. So that's why I thought it was important when you have this huge binder, we have actually several binders of pictures of field days throughout the years, that those photographs of the kids in blackface go right among all the rest of them, so that you know the context of what was happening, and that racism was happening right in the middle of all these other celebration things that were going on in Hamlin Park. So to pull those photos out, even if you don't rip them up and throw them away and ignore them, but to even pull them out and put them over here so we don't have to look at them, takes them out of the context and takes some of that, what we can learn from them, out of it. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it, but my thought is that we have to deal head on with things that make us uncomfortable and the history that makes us uncomfortable. One of the things that comes up, and this isn't just like national history or racism or women's rights and how women were treated and all those host of other things, Native American rights, all those things that we talk about throughout history. Also your own personal history. When folks come in to research their house or research their family, it's become a lot easier to search for things online. Newspapers are digitized. A lot of history is much more accessible. So I warn folks that if you're going to look up digital newspapers about a family member, you're going to put your family member's name in, your grandma's name in, you're going to find out everything. You're going to find out birth, marriage, death, when she was arrested, all those things, if and when she was arrested. Not every grandma was arrested, but but we have to embrace the story and someone's entire life. Same with your house. People may have passed away in your house. If you don't want to know that, you just have to be prepared for that, because it will come up, but it's part of the entire story of your house. It might be uncomfortable, but it is part of your history. So we can't ignore even stuff in our own personal history, because it's part of that story. And it shows how we got to where we are today. So I'd be interested in hearing any comments or that folks have about this, and whether or not, if it ever is appropriate, to leave some history in the past. I'd be interested if there's any specific cases that you might have. So thanks again for joining me and putting up with my allergies this week. Thanks. Hopefully next week I'll be in better shape. And I think we will talk about Millard Fillmore next week, and why we need to study him, unless some other topic comes up. I think that'll be a good one to talk about, because national politics seems to be in the news again. Again, these videos, I am the town and village historian, but these videos and a lot of my research is done separately from that, so anything I say and talk about here is not connected to my job as officially the town and village historian. Again, please leave comments in either in the comments or send me a private message. And as always, thank you for keeping history alive. We'll see you next week.